And I want to say good evening to everybody and thank you for joining Reading League Wisconsin for our second Wisconsin Educator Roundtable. My name is Mary Newton. I'm the president of Reading League Wisconsin. For those of you who might be new to our organization, we're the Wisconsin chapter of a national organization called the Reading League, which is located in Syracuse, New York. And we maintain our own Wisconsin nonprofit organization, do our own programming, but we share this simple mission with the Reading League and with other Reading League chapters. And that is simply that the Reading League seeks to share knowledge and inspire change in the area of effective reading instruction. So this series of roundtables with Wisconsin educators is an effort to share information about good things that are happening in Wisconsin around the science of reading, and to open up some lines of communication among educators who are on this journey. Some of us are just starting out and others have been on the journey for several years. And each stage, as we find, has different challenges and different rewards. So I want to thank all of our presenters tonight for sharing their experiences with us. They're all very different experiences, but are valuable to hear about. We will be announcing tomorrow on our social media that we have added a third roundtable to this series, and that will be on May 6th at 7 p.m. So you have a little advance notice of that. It will also be free, so watch our Facebook for registration information, and if you are on our email list, we'll be sending that information out via email also. We are approved by Alta and IMSLIC to offer 1.5 continuing education hours for tonight's session. So the way we're going to keep track of that is near the end of the meeting tonight, probably right after the speakers are done and before we go into Q&A, we're going to post a link in the chat box that you can use to tell us if you want a certificate of attendance. And don't worry about keeping your eyes glued to the chat, because we have that under control. We'll let you know when that link is being posted. And so now I'm going to turn things over to one of our Reading League Wisconsin board members and tonight's moderator, Rachel Hesprich. Rachel?
Thank you, Mary. Welcome, everybody. We are glad that you are here, and we are going to get going right into it. I'll be moderating and working us through our presenters. And based on the slides that I've seen, we have a full docket of information coming your way. You can see on our screen our presenters and where they are from. They will be introducing themselves as they begin and their presentation. Mary, I don't know if I lost the sharing. Oh, there we go. So just a few Zoom etiquette reminders. Please keep your mic muted. And when we do Q&A, you can unmute to ask questions based on how much time we have. You can also be adding questions in throughout, and Mary will be looking at those. And as a reminder, we are recording our session and it will be posted on the Reading League Wisconsin YouTube channel. I wanted to make sure everybody can see where in Wisconsin our presenters are coming from, and you can see they're in a variety of locations throughout Wisconsin. I wanted to point out that Annika is at Carroll, but she also lives in La Crosse and is in that area as well. We also did another webinar, another roundtable back in March, and I wanted everybody to get an opportunity to see. If you weren't with us, you can always watch that one on our YouTube channel, and you can see who those presenters were and where they were in the state of Wisconsin. And I think it's great news that you can see throughout Wisconsin, people are looking, our educators are invested in their journeys into the science of reading. I think one of the things that we need to address before we hear our panelists is we hear the term science of reading, and I've learned in my 30+ years in education education ends up with terms, and they definitely can mean different things to different people. And the Reading League, our National Reading League, has been working on trying to bring some clarity to that. So I'm going to give everybody about 30 seconds to read a definition that they have been working on. And I think that definition is helpful for people to understand what that means to say science of reading. To go a little deeper, I'm going to click on our link that we have to the Science of Reading, a Defining Moment, which this is the Reading League's website on whatisthescienceofreading.org. And I find that their preamble, this video, will be a great way to get us started. So it's about 2 minutes.
Humankind's most precious treasure is our children, and our future depends on them. We recognize literacy as a fundamental human right that empowers individuals in a society. We also know that grim life outcomes are connected to illiteracy. We are resolved to prevent the collateral damage that is incurred by our students, especially the most vulnerable among them, when adults have limited access to the convergent scientific evidence. Research has yielded proven assessment and instructional practices with which every teacher and leader should be equipped. We believe that providing educators with this knowledge is a moral imperative. We are committed to evidence-aligned reading instruction being scaled with a sense of urgency in a comprehensive and systematic way by multiple stakeholders. We know that our children can be taught to read properly the first time. In a knowledge economy, the currency of the 21st century will be built on the foundation of skilled reading. Students who can read well have a place at the table of opportunity, whether their aspirations lead them to preparation for college or the workforce. We believe in a future where a collective focus on applying the science of reading through teacher and leader preparation, classroom application, and community engagement will elevate and transform every community, every nation through the power of literacy. Join us.
I find that video is a great way to start out. And again, thank you to all of you for joining us, and to our panelists for now, who they're going to share us their journeys. And we are starting with Dr. Annika Paran Stano, who I've been working on saying her name. So thank you for being with us, Annika, and I'll let you get started.
Thank you, Rachel, and good job with my name. It's not an easy one. I don't know what I was thinking when I picked up my husband's name and paired that with mine. It's definitely not a phonetic name experience. So thank you very much for the introduction, and thanks to the Reading League for inviting me tonight. I'm really happy to be here to share with this exemplary panel of speakers and with everybody who's listening and watching tonight around the state of Wisconsin and maybe in other locations as well. I only have about 4 slides to share with you tonight. A little bit about my personal background and experience in the field of education, and then a couple of initiatives I'm working on now. And then a little bit about the lessons I'm in the progress of learning and lessons I've learned kind of on my journey, learning about the science of reading and thinking about students. Yeah, so with that being said, On my first slide here, you can see that tonight I'm here representing the micro-credential program in dyslexia that leads to the certification at dyslexia interventionist level from Carroll University. This is a new program that I've helped launch with Dr. Colleen Pennell, and she presented at the previous roundtable last month. So she was able to share a little bit about our initiative there at Carroll last month. A bit more about my background. I think I'm somewhere in the area of 25 years of teaching experience. I'd have to count back and figure out, back into my youth to get a precise number, but it's something like 25 years in a variety of settings. I worked in a Head Start classroom and kindergarten, first grade. I moved into a Title I reading position here in Wisconsin. I proceeded to go back to graduate school at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I finished my PhD in curriculum and instruction there in 2013. And since then, I've taught a variety of courses at the undergraduate level and at the graduate level. And I think where I was able to turn the page from my sort of balanced literacy whole language training was working as the adolescent literacy coach and professional development leader for the school district of La Crosse. And that was a position that I held starting in 2017. And I learned so much in that position. I was able to look really widely at district reading achievement data and to support teachers in their efforts to understand and use data for instructional decision making. I did a presentation on some of that work at WSRA's 2018 conference. It was entitled Envisioning Literacy Support in the High School. And for those of you who've worked with middle school students or high school students who are struggling readers, I think you might be able to relate to some of these experiences. What I found in that position was that as students get older and move out of the elementary school setting, the opportunities to provide foundational reading skill support in an intervention context or even in special education become greatly diminished. The focus seems to change. In elementary school, we still have time and intervention structures built into the schools and support staff to provide those services. But as students get older, those opportunities become less and less as the focus becomes more on content classes, graduation requirements, GPA, extracurriculars, and different things like that. So this became very concerning to me as I encountered more and more adolescent students who were really struggling with basic skills in reading. And there's one student in particular that really, among many students that I've worked with, one in particular who was a high school student that really pushed me forward into my exploration into other ways of teaching reading. And this student I've kind of nicknamed O. And he was a high school freshman who had been in special education and he came to the high school with an IEP and receiving tier 3 intervention in 7th and 8th grade. He was not given his special education. He was not considered learning disabled. He was emotionally and behavior. His EBD diagnosis was the reason for his special ed accommodations. But now knowing what I know and looking back, he fit the profile of a dyslexic student so perfectly. And I remember feeling, as I met him and worked with him, very inadequate in my own background and training in ways to support him and help him grow as a learner, as a freshman and then a sophomore and then a junior in high school. So what we were faced with was a struggling student who was just a representative of many other struggling students, who was about to age out of the K-12 school system with very limited literacy skills. And I knew I had to do something. I had to do something to make up gaps in my own training and education, so then I could pass that along to students like O. So when I left the position with the school district of La Crosse, I pursued Orton-Gillingham training and became certified through the Center for Effective Reading Instruction with the IDA. And I learned a tremendous amount and was able to reflect on all the things that I didn't really know coming through my initial teacher training, my master's program, my PhD program, and my multiple licensures in the area of reading. So I was very grateful to have kind of figured out that and reflected on my own experience and realized that I had much, much more to learn. So now I'm working at the Stern Center for Language and Learning, which is located in Williston, Vermont. I work in that position remotely as a structured literacy coach. And I'm going to share a little bit more about that initiative, as well as the Carroll initiative. On the service and advocacy side, I serve on the Wisconsin, in the Wisconsin IDA, on the board of that branch of the IDA. And I'm also developing an OG-based reading clinic at the Boys and Girls Club here in La Crosse. You can go ahead and switch the slides, Rachel, thank you. So I wanted to share just a little bit with you about my initiative through the Stern Center. I'm gonna move my slide too, there we go. So the Stern Center, like I mentioned, is a nonprofit education center located in Williston, Vermont, and they do a great variety of things at the Stern Center. They work directly with students, they do evaluations, they have professional learning division for educators, speech and language, social and emotional learning and communication. So a very wide variety of services at the Stern Center. The project I'm involved in is called Lead to Read, and it's a large-scale systems change initiative working with school district administration, teachers, and support teams. And this is my first complete year working with them. It's been a wonderful year of coaching teachers in their implementation of structured literacy. I included one, just a little snapshot of data to share with you tonight from some of our outcome measures with the Lead to Read program. And this slide was developed by an independent evaluator this year, reflecting on the previous year's cohort of teachers who participated in the program. And what I'd like to call your attention to is that just short little snippet of data in the red box. This is a percentage, a sample of teachers who took our pre and post assessment, reflecting on their own knowledge and capabilities to work with struggling readers. And so we had them rate their preparedness to teach readers in their classrooms. And this is a sample of about 90 teachers, interventionists, special education providers. And they had to rank their own preparedness in the categories there along the left-hand side. So overall, how did they feel prepared to teach struggling readers to read in the area of phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension? And as you can see, the percentages are quite low. The teachers gave themselves anywhere from 26% up to 56% rate of feeling prepared to teach struggling readers. And this is concerning, but also enlightening to me, because I know that teachers are pursuing on their own time and with their own resources, training and education in the science of reading and structured literacy. So as they proceeded through our program, we're happy to learn that they ranked themselves much higher in the spring of 2020 after they participated in our program. But I think that the real take-home message here is that many teachers did not feel prepared to teach struggling readers before they had additional training and knowledge base in the area of structured literacy and the science of reading. Okay, Rachel, thanks. You can go ahead and switch the slide. So here are just a couple of quotes. And I'm not going to read these through. This is just sort of background as I share a little bit more about the Carroll program. Here in Wisconsin, I was approached to help develop a non-credit bearing but university-based program to help teachers become familiar with structured literacy and the science of reading in a capacity that they could then proceed with a student practicum and then implement practices either in a tutoring type of scenario or in their classrooms. So at Carroll University, what Colleen Pinnell and I have done was develop a series of 4 courses that take place over a span of 1 calendar year and that lead to what we call a micro-credential. So they're not graduate credit courses. They don't earn graduate credit. The first 2 courses are about 8 weeks in length, and the second 2 courses are 15 weeks in length, and those are the 2 that include the practicum. We're about halfway through the first cohort of students moving through this program at this time, and we've gotten very, very positive feedback just about what the teachers are learning, how it's filling gaps for them, how some of the knowledge they're gaining from the program is helping them solve the mystery of students that they couldn't quite figure out before they started to learn more about structured literacy. And I think that we feel very encouraged that teachers are pursuing this type of training on their own. And I think in our next cohort, we have a small group of students or of candidates from the same school district. So that's very exciting to think about, building a body of knowledge within one school district that they can then take back and apply and tell their peers and colleagues about. So just a bit more about this program. What we sought to do was to have teachers prepared to take the KPIRI, which is the certification exam from the IDA, and to apply for certification at the interventionist level. So in order to do that, we're providing an 8-week course in the foundations of reading, an 8-week course in advanced word reading, and we, through the course number 2, students are taken through the process of developing an Orton-Gillingham-based structured literacy lesson plan. In course 3, they learn about assessment that will go ahead and inform their instruction with their practicum student, and then begin that practicum. And then in course number 4, they complete the practicum as well as complete a case study that they'll then use to apply to SARI for certification. So that program is meant to be complete in 1 calendar year, and we have our second cohort beginning in May. And I just want to point out, like I said before, we've gotten very positive feedback, and we're very proud to have this program available in Wisconsin, sponsored by one of the universities and teacher training programs. Okay, Rachel, last slide. Thank you. So just to kind of finish up with a couple of lessons, or I guess there's a handful here. I feel, as I reflect back on my journey as a classroom teacher and as a literacy coach, as a title teacher, and then as an adjunct faculty member in teacher training programs, I'm not sure I ever felt as well equipped to teach readers and to fill in gaps with kids and to figure out how to solve the mystery of the struggling reader as I do now with my structured literacy and science-based training. I think back to, I was a Title I reading interventionist in Beloit Public Schools before my oldest son was born. And we had such complex cases of students, just very hard to pinpoint what was going on with kids, and using curriculum that really did not help solve the mystery, and assessments that also didn't really help. I wish I could go back to that role, knowing what I know now, and look at students' phonemic and phonological awareness, and to assess their nonsense word fluency, and to figure out how kids were applying what they understood about how our English language works and is structured, to kind of crack the code and solve the mysteries of these struggling readers. But unfortunately, we can't go back in time. We can only go forward. And as I proceed, in my position at the Stern Center and with the Carroll program, these are some of the things I'm thinking about, big picture sort of lessons that I'm in the process of learning. So the first one, just broadly speaking, teachers are seeking out this information on their own. They want to know about the systems and structures of the English language, maybe because they weren't taught as learners or they weren't taught in teacher education, but they realize that there might be a gap in their own understanding and knowledge there. So they're really actively seeking out training opportunities to figure out, some of these pieces on their own, and then be able to pass that knowledge on to their students. And to that end, universities and district leadership, and even our regional CSAs, can evolve and support by offering training and equitable evidence-based best practices. So I think we need, as we think about the role of teacher education and support through the CSAs, we need to look for an evolution there to include the science of reading and structured literacy to really reach all of our learners, including those who might be at risk of reading failure. We're also thinking really closely about the role of school administration in this work. And because Lead to Read is really meant to be a system-wide initiative, we know that the engagement of administrators in this learning is really, really critical so that sustained change can be achieved and they can provide ongoing teacher support in the area of structured literacy. We have to think about when to engage in direct and explicit instruction. We know that human beings are not hardwired to learn to read. We know we're hardwired to learn to speak, but that understanding and that kind of expectation for kids to kind of pick up reading naturally, that does not serve all students. So it's really important for us to think about in our own classroom practices, the important role of direct and explicit instruction when it comes to helping students learn to read and to understand the system and structures of the English language. And lastly, we know that large scale change can be really slow. And in Wisconsin, we have, it's kind of a difficult climate for this conversation, but I think that the outlook is really, really positive, and that teachers can start conversations in their district and to bring practices into their classrooms now that can make really, really good benefit for all students. Those changes can be small, even microscopic, but to start building things into your practice now in the area of structured literacy will benefit all the students in your room, even those who might be natural, pick it up on their own readers, as well as those who might be at risk for struggling later in life. So with that in mind, and some of those big sort of picture questions, I want to pass it on to the next panelist and to hear about what our great colleagues are doing around the state in individual districts to put some of these ideas into practice.
Thank you, Annika, and thank you for giving us a perspective from the university level and teacher training perspective. It was a great way to get us started. And now we will be going to a school district in Wisconsin, in Sturgeon Bay. And Jeannie, I will let you take it from here.
Thank you, Rachel. And I'm going to say, yeah, I agree with you, Annika. Change is slow. If you can read my slide a bit, you can see that I've been on this personal journey of the science of reading and change in our district for a long time, 7 years. And I totally can relate with you, Annika, as well, to the struggles in the middle school. So I've been working 31 years in education. Currently, I'm the middle school reading specialist at TJ Walker Middle School in Sturgeon Bay. And so I've been working in the middle school for 10 years. The first 7 in the middle school, I was the I was 7th grade English language arts teacher. And so at that time, my daughter was identified with dyslexia, and that was really my personal turning point in my personal and professional journey. Prior to that, 31 years ago, I was really born and raised in whole language in Wisconsin. And I lived in that echo chamber, as Margaret said the other night, living in this world of balanced literacy and whole language, and really was not privy to the science and the research. And when I was teaching 3rd grade, that's when we were reading first school here in Sturgeon Bay. I had a chance to get a little bit of science, but there was not a lot of support, I think, with the whole professional development in our district. And at that time, then reading first kind of, it just kind of fell away, that initiative. It really failed in our school district. And around that time, reading first failed, I moved into the middle school. And then shortly after I moved into the middle school, my daughter was identified with dyslexia. And because I had a 316, 317 license at that time, the special ed director reached out to me and said, would you like to go to a training to work with a student in the middle school, 7th grade, that was identified with dyslexia? And I said, absolutely. So I spent a week of my summer down in Milwaukee on IMSI training. And that just kind of led my course and my journey as far as my trainings and my experience in the middle school. And for the last 3 years, my full-time job has been as an interventionist in the middle school. And I agree with you, Annika, what you feel like in the middle school is, I think, elementary, they work with the kids and they just kind of pass them on, and they don't really realize the social emotional impact of not being able to read in the middle school, and how difficult that is to see on a daily basis, and work with these struggling kids that have been struggling really their whole lives. And they've been in reading intervention since kindergarten, and they get into the middle school and they're still in a reading intervention. And it's painful. So that kind of led me, that personal pain of my daughter and her struggle, and the struggle in my students, made me feel like we have to do something in our district. We have to change what's happening to our kids. So you can go to the next slide then, Rachel. So in our experience in Sturgeon Bay, it's been really organic in nature, our shift to the science. it really kind of started with my knowledge that I had and recognizing that kids were really struggling in my own training. And for the last 7 years since I started that training, I've just been nudging staff gently, having side conversations, sending webinars, talking to my principal, and my middle school principal has young daughters. And so I'd say, we got to start looking at this, and have you watched this video, and take a look at this book, and going to my other reading coaches and say, have you thought about this? Have you listened to Emily Hanford? And just really, really, really nudging them and just having those conversations to try to get them to kind of open up. But then what kind of happened in the last year, parents, last couple of years actually, is parents in our community started voicing more concerns about their kids and their struggles and their frustrations. I mean, we've had some parents in our community taking their kids down to the dyslexia center in Appleton, actually. And so there was some of that voice on the outside that really started the administrators really starting to feel like, we really have to stop and take a look at what's going on. And so it was last spring, really, when this kind of all happened, when the elementary principal said, we got to present to the school board. Well, prior to that, actually, we had some literacy coaches and principal attend that WSRA conference, Annika, and I think that's the one that you were involved with that brought Kilpatrick and Blevins, right? And it just happened that they went to that conference and heard David Kilpatrick and heard Wiley Blevins, that our other reading coaches who really were steeped in the balanced literacy really started thinking about their practice and thinking about what they didn't realize they didn't know. And so that was a game changer for our district, that those coaches going to that training. So anyways, we had to present to the school board about literacy and what was happening in our district, which made us dive into our data as a team, as a literacy team of coaches. And that's kind of where we kind of got a grip of our own reality, just a slight little grip of our reality. So you can go to the next slide. So as we were preparing for this board presentation, I'm putting slides in about dyslexia and the simple view and Scarborough's reading rope. And, our other coaches, they're kind of like, yeah, okay. They just really still weren't bought and sold. But we presented to the board and we all realized that our kids, we dove into our data, but not enough really, but we really realized when we looked at our forward scores from the 2018-2019 school year, that we had 56% of our 56% of our students in grades 3 through 8 score below benchmark. And that was an eye-opener for many of us when we really looked at that number. And when we realized Nancy Young's word ladder, right? And what the percentages really should be. And we had 56% of our kids scoring below benchmark in grades 3 through 8. So that led us to, in July, you can kind of see our timeline. What's been great about our district, because it's been kind of organic in nature, we've had not a problem reaching out to outside people. So my middle school principal reached out to Eric Larson in CISA 6 and hired him to come in and look at our data and just tell us what we needed to know that maybe we weren't ready to hear. And we spent a day last July and he looked at our 5-year trends with our forward scores, our star scores, and we kind of got a greater grip on our reality. And one of the big eye openers was, besides the one that we figured out with our forward, was just the trend line that we were seeing. Our trend was going down. We were going backwards. And the hard pill to swallow was that our 3rd grade scores were below the state average on the forward. And Eric Larson just sat in front of our literacy leaders and says, you guys got to make some changes here. You got to add some more phonics into what you're doing. And that's all some people really, really needed to hear. So it's kind of led our literacy coaches to spend some time doing a book study, reading Kilpatrick's Etiquette book, We also read When You Know Better, Do Better. And the reason why the coaches did this book study is the other coaches in the district, I neglected to say, we have one high school, one middle school, and we have 2 elementary buildings. So we all have different barriers. We have silos. Our district is built in silos. And so because our coaches are spread all over and everybody has their own ideas about reading, we just really wanted to get everybody on the same page and have the same language. So we decided to do this book study right after the data dive. And then we also decided as literacy coaches and administrators actually to take the CISA 8 Academy from Darla Brink, which was a Science of Reading Academy, like her version of letters. And that started in the fall. So shortly after the July data dig, we decided as a group that this job was too big for us to just do on our own, that we really needed to find somebody as an outside consultant to come in and give us the make us have the hard conversations and make us continue to reflect how we can be better and do things differently. So it was my mission to find a consultant. So I personally reached out to many across the country in our own state, put together a pretty copious list for a literacy team and administrators. They've narrowed it down to 3 possible consultants to hire. We had all the same questions. We interviewed all 3 of them, came together as a team and selected Dr. Daniel Thompson from the Transformative Reading Group to guide our journey. And the things that, we really, really liked about what we felt she could bring to us was her deep knowledge in dyslexia. We felt that was a big part of the conversation in our community. And she had a ton of background in that in her presentation, her background as a speech and language pathologist, and the fact that we really felt she was going to take us where we needed to go. So the board approved Dr. Thompson to be our consultant, and in March, she came for our 3-day visit, which I'm going to let her kind of talk a little bit about that because I know she's on this call. She provided some easy wins for our district. In May, we're going to have all the staff, administrators, everyone take this knowledge survey through Tim Odegaard. Because as you said, Annika, we have to kind of get a baseline about where's everybody's knowledge at. And we're going to have this survey, and it's through Tim Odegaard, Middle Tennessee State University, and he's part of this study where he's creating a norming data of teachers. So it's a pretty difficult test, actually. All the coaches and administrators already took it in February, so we already know what it's all about. And so we also are planning on in June to start the professional development step, which is the reading coaches. I've already taken top 10 tools, but the reading coaches are going to take top 10 tools. And then for the next 2 years, we're going to seep our staff into the science of reading knowledge through Deb Glazer's reading teachers top 10 tools. So it'll be a 2-year professional development, K-5. And I know Dr. Thompson has something special planned for the middle school and high school. So next slide. And then if Nell, you want to go ahead and just chime in about where we go next.
Well, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm chiming in from Bozeman, Montana, and that's really a funny little picture there you put on there, Jeannie. So
because you're helping us climb that mountain,
Yeah, that's right. So I'm very honored to be on this journey with all of you in Wisconsin. It's very exciting to be able to share this process. I think I want to let you know that, as a national letters trainer, for quite some time in my life, I helped do a massive amount of training in Mississippi right before all their NAEP scores changed. And I learned a lot being in every corner of Mississippi. I'm a rural North Dakota farm girl, and I brought to the table something that when I interviewed with Sturgeon Bay, it just was a really solid reminder that we're all on our own journey, and it's going to take each one of us a different time period to arrive. But we're all going to get there. And so that was part of the opportunity I had to share with every teacher in March in doing walkthroughs and really looking at quick wins, things that you already have right in front of you that you can just nail and feel super confident about. And also doing an overall audit of where are we realistically? Do we see decoding strategies in classrooms as simplistic as that, to actually looking at, do we have valid and reliable assessment tools that we know were normed using atypical and typical readers in the age bandwidths we're looking at, and are the statistics predictive of reading difficulty, or are they predictive of a high stakes assessment? And so it's been really wonderful within just a few weeks from saying, here's some quick wins, to already transforming the screening tools just like that. Now we'll be having Nadine Gabb's brand new screening tool, which I helped do some validation work on for her. And it was really an incredible shift that we're going to have. And I could put a plug in for that in and of itself, because it's going to be the only tool out there that will assess both sides of the simple view of reading on an iPad or a tablet in 20 minutes, and we'll get data back about language and pre-literacy skills. That's so powerful. And so the kindergarten and preschool teams are going to have this tool that they've never had this knowledge about. We're going to flip the story right away at the early grade levels and have that data to drive decision making about instruction. And we're going to build teacher knowledge. And it's because the teachers are excited, open, and ready to change. And we're going to meet them right where they're at with that drip, drip, drip effect that's going to really be exciting. It was really exciting to be in Sturgeon Bay. Jeannie has done a ton of work, but they've done the work too. And they're all at different spaces of their knowledge, and they're so excited. And so it's going to be an incredible story for the rest of the state to also appreciate and to help in our journey as well.
Right.
So
yeah, that's year one. If you go to the next slide, Rachel, I mean, it's kind of like Nell's going to be working with us for the next 2 years. We're going to be working through the needs assessment and the audit and looking at all these areas of our school. So it's just really, really exciting, because into the future, we'll see where this brings right now. So yeah, that's Sturgeon Bay.
Thank you very much. I'm sitting here taking notes, and all of the different resources that, from people resources, I just think of all of the people that you brought in and the different PD that you were able to use to support your staff, and having that plan in order to be able to know where you want to get to. So thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Thompson, for joining us all the way from Montana. Next, we have the Thorpe School District, and Amy and Nicole will be presenting together. I'll let you two get started.
All right. Hello, I'm Amy Brunswell. I am the reading specialist here in Thorpe. I have about 25 years in education. About 20 of that has been at Thorpe, both as a teacher and as a reading specialist. So we were asked to come up with our why. Why did we make the switch? And I was thinking back and realized that one of the biggest reasons was that I knew there was problem, but I didn't really know how to fix it, because as a Title I teacher, the kids just kept coming to me, same kids year after year. They never graduated out of what I was doing with them, because I always did the same thing, did the same intervention every year, and never had any better results than I did the year before. We started collecting data, but we didn't really know what to do with any of it. And it just seemed like there was so much that was wrong with what we were doing that we didn't know where to start. And so once we started on this journey, we realized that there just wasn't enough of the Title I staff to intervene our way out of a problem that seemed to be universal. So that tends to be our little mantra that we use.
Hello, my name is Nicole Dembski. I'm the school psychologist for Thorpe. This is about my 13th year in education, 3rd year in Thorpe. So I was fairly fortunate because when we started our journey with the science of reading was actually my 1st year in Thorpe. So I was able to kind of start right away, right out the gate with everybody, with all the new changes that we had. So my why looking at this, I have a little bit of a different perspective just because I'm a school psychologist. So I don't have the same kind of reading lens as maybe some of the other panelists, but you know, I started to see as we've progressed in this journey, how much really there is an overlap with that. So, you know, really a big part of my job is data and MTSS and making sure that, you know, we screen kids and we analyze that data correctly. And I have a big passion for just collaborating with teachers and not just collecting the data, but actually making it useful for staff and for students. So I was really intrigued and excited about the idea of, you know, making this shift toward a better universal instructional system, as well as, you know, having effective interventions and really making, in the end, sound special education referrals. You know, in Wisconsin, you need to have 2 intensive interventions when you look at a specific learning disability referral. So for me, it was kind of a win-win to make sure that we were having really good special education referrals and a solid MTSS system.
Next slide. All right, so I thought I'd start with a little historical perspective of where we were. In most of the years that I've worked in Thorpe, there has really been limited leadership knowledge of reading. Not a lot of our superintendents came into our building to lead us in the area of reading. They might have led our school in other areas, but not there, not where I wanted it. Our professional development revolved around that old one and done theory of you go to a 1-day class and you come back and you're all pumped up, and then there's really no initiative to make that a sustained change over time. We tended to work in silos. Someone would go to a really great class and come back and maybe share it with their grade level teammates, but it really wasn't shared across the staff as a whole. So as time went on, we decided, like I told you, we really did know there was a problem and we didn't know where to begin. So a group of us kind of got together and were able to go to RTI's Universal Reading, I think it was a 2-day program that they put on. And then we came back and developed what we called the Literacy Task Force. We tried really hard for a couple of years to initiate some change, but overall, again, we really didn't have the upper level leadership that we needed to make that change. And there was just so many different things that felt like they were out of place, that we didn't have a strong direction to go in. We had been using our curriculum, Reading Street by Pearson, now Savas, for at least 3 years prior to us. Actually, I think it was 4 years prior to us even starting with the science of reading. But the way that we used it across the grade levels differed significantly from grade to grade. As I was a 4th grade teacher when we adopted Reading Street, and honestly, I could just pick and choose whatever I wanted to out of that book to teach, and there was really no guidance in what should or shouldn't be taught. Our interventions, once I moved into the reading specialist position here at school, was very much the theory of your kids and our kids versus our kids. If we had kids that had difficulties in the classroom at all, it was the classroom teacher's perception to pawn them off to Title I. If they can't read, if they have problems, here, you take them, you fix them, and when you're all done, you send them back to me. Again, like I said, we were using the same old intervention. We were using LLI. Occasionally we'd throw in some Here Builder and explode the code, but we really weren't targeting any deficit skills. And if we couldn't fix them in Title I, well, then we just would refer them for special ed, because that was the next step. We just kept going through the motions of, if we can't do it, then they must be special education kids. We were also using, for assessments, we assessed 3 times a year with the STAR assessment system. And then a couple of years after that, we added DRA, the DRA 2 kits to all of our pre-K through 6 classrooms, and then everyone did DRA testing, and we had levels. So we knew where everyone was and if they were growing as the year went on. But again, we still didn't know what skills they had and what skills they didn't have. So another piece of that assessment was that only the special education and Title I staff did any progress monitoring with the kids. And honestly, we didn't really even know what that information was giving us. We could tell if they were going up or down, but we just kind of watched the numbers move and didn't really know what to do with any of those numbers. I know I spent a lot of time looking at them and hoping they would go up, but and getting excited when they did or disappointed when they didn't. But honestly, we didn't really know what the numbers were telling us. And part of that, I think, with the STAR system at the time anyway, was it was just an overall broad one score that told you whether they were or were not on grade level. It never really diagnosed or was more specific on what the kids were missing. And finally, grade level data meetings. What were those? We never had grade level data meetings. Like, we were supposed to do that. So that was kind of that's our background. And then if you want to go to the next slide. In 2018, John Humphreys became our superintendent at our school. And I don't think it's an understatement to say that he rocked our world with the changes and the knowledge that he brought to our district, and the ambition and the drive and the motivation to initiate change and sustain it. Along with that year, we also got Misty Trowbridge became our director of student services, special education student services, and Nicole Densky joined us. And wow, we had someone who knew what to do with the data. I was kind of geeking out on like somebody else who looked at the numbers besides me, which was pretty cool. We also plowed into professional development. And for once in my career, professional development was ongoing. It involved the entire staff. And the type of professional development that we did put our entire staff on the same page as what our reading specialists or reading teachers were, and also on the same page as like what our speech and language clinicians were. Those of us that are in that have the 316 and 17 licenses or our SLPs have a little bit higher knowledge of what graphemes and phonemes are and how to manipulate or substitute, delete, insert phonemes, and we're doing phonological awareness. But none of the rest of the staff knew anything that we were talking about. And so the first year, this summer, we did a Reading Rockets 101 training. We required everybody to do all, I think it was 9 modules, and then respond with takeaways and aha moments in a Google Doc. One school, just before school started, Susan Nettie from Best Practice Associates came up from Louisiana and shared with the staff the background knowledge of being able to pronounce the phonemes correctly. So we weren't saying buh and tuh anymore, which is information for some of our teachers. And I think most importantly, our district hired Schools Cubed to come in and initiate that whole system change that needed to happen. I know that the leadership team met before school started, and I think it was 2 days worth of just understanding what Schools Cubed's purpose was for us and what their goals were. And I think at that time, I felt like a lot of it just kind of went over my head, like, oh my gosh, there's so much that we need to do. How can we possibly accomplish this task? But it was one of the things that I think is really important is that with Schools Cubed, we didn't have to do everything at once. We very much use a progression. We got a baseline score of where we were, and then we're able to make progress towards goals. So that was pretty important. And the other huge addition to the reason why we ended up doing this was John Humphreys was friends with Donna, and Donna was a science of reading gal. So she walked into our school and opened my mind up to a lot of, to looking back at my undergraduate education and how much it was a matter of whole language, and that now we were into something different. We attended Plain Talk. We had some explicit instruction with Angie Hanlon, our coach from Schools Cubed, and even some of us took some OG training. Again, our curriculum was still Reading Street, but we had a little PD to help us know what parts of it to teach. And then of course we added Haggerty for some phonological awareness universally, grades pre-K through 3. Our interventions changed a little bit. We started taking deeper dives, so we knew what things we should be doing with the kids. So if you want to head on to the next slide.
Okay. Well, like Amy had mentioned earlier, a big part of our getting started was working with Schools Cubed. So they came in and really helped kind of solidify how we were going to build up our MTSS. So, you know, I've worked in districts in the past where we've built it from the ground up and we've had that support. And I've been in districts where it was a person and that person left and there went your system. So I knew the importance of making sure we could build from the ground up. So I was just very, very impressed with, you know, their layout. So they provide us the next steps report. They visit us 3 times a year. However, they're always available, you know, virtually or phone call or text, whatever it is. They're pretty much there whenever we need them. So the way they break that up is they target those areas. So universal instruction, interventions, assessment, school leadership team, professional development, and then database decision making. So those are those areas where, like Amy mentioned, you know, they rated where we were at. And honestly, we were pretty much at 0 for most of them. And that was okay. And then they would provide us, okay, this is what you need to do to keep building that system. So, I mean, by no means are we perfect, but we've come a long ways. So one of the things that we started out with right away was creating a district assessment team. And at that point, it consisted of myself, Amy, and then Rachel is our other reading interventionist. Misty Trowbridge is our director of student services. And then Jessica Morello is our speech and language pathologist. And again, like Amy said, if you don't utilize your speech and language pathologist, start doing that because they have a wealth of knowledge that you don't even realize until you get into this process, and then just tap into those individuals. And then we had a data team, and really year one, our data team was Amy and myself and Rachel, our other interventionist. And we had a principal who at the time was middle school and elementary. So his involvement was very limited. It really kind of fell to the 3 of us to sort of lead through some of the data. We switched that year to FastBridge. That was our new assessment system that we looked at. And, you know, we felt like having a consistent assessment team was important in our district. So we kind of trained ourselves. We had that group of us that went and we did the screening 3 times a year. And actually the first year we did it 4 times a year. We did progress monitoring, you know, the weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. So we felt like, okay, we're doing a lot of these things. We had a built-in kind of early release day on Wednesdays where we were looking at, you know, some collaboration time. But honestly, at that point in time, it was more like a staff meeting. Like we would get everybody together. We would talk about, hey, we're starting to do some of these things. And it was overall kind of your general systems, you know, changes. So this is, you know, what we're doing in instruction. These are some of the things we're doing with data, but we didn't really look at the data. We kind of just talked about it. But then we started to see a little bit of that mind shift when it came to special education. Like Amy had said earlier, there was kind of like Title I and then there was special ed. And it was like, if we don't fix them in Title I, then they go on to special ed. So the implementation starting year 1 was starting to see that, wait a second, there's more to than just, you know, the gateway into special education. We also did our grade level data meetings. So like she said, that was something that Thorpe had really never looked at in the past. We did those after our screening period. So fall, winter, and spring. Again, it was more of just getting used to staff being familiar with our data systems. So FastBridge was new to all of us. We also use EduClimber in our district. So just getting staff accustomed to these are the systems that house your data. You know, for the most part, the data analysis and really digging into it fell primarily on myself, Amy, and Rachel, our other interventionist. Staff looked at it, we would present it to them, but again, we were kind of like, hey, we have more green than red, that's great. You know, we really didn't dig into it very much, but again, we were just kind of proud of ourselves for having these meetings. So in the spring, that's where we started to really see a momentum shift. So Schools Cube had come in, our consultant at the time was Angie. She had come into our spring data meeting and she really just started breaking it down for us. And it, you know, as a psych, it was just eye-opening how I had never desegregated the data the way that she was showing me to do it. So I was super excited. And, you know, it just, I think, was very eye-opening for all of us to see that, no, you got to start looking at your data this way. It's not just a problem in reading. What is it in reading? Is it sounds? Is it, you know, PA? Is it, you know, names? Where do we have to backtrack and fill that gap? So they introduced us to the STAT meeting protocol form as well as an action plan. And that's really where we started. And that's where we've continued on. Next slide, please. So as you can see this, I wanted to throw some data in there because, you know, I'm a psych and that's what I do. So you'll kind of see throughout our presentation, just little snippets of data here and there, but this is, you know, our year one. So again, you're not going to come in and you're going to make, you know, just drastic changes. Not everybody's going to be at benchmark right away. So what we really looked at was growth. And, you know, I'll credit that to John Humphreys because he was big into growth. So this is just a snapshot of our third grade student growth. So if you look at the CBM, so that's your fluency passage for FastBridge, you can see from fall to spring, we had 84% of our students had that typical or aggressive growth. So not necessarily at benchmark, but the rate in which they were growing was so much higher than we had seen in the past that we were just, you know, ecstatic about that. And then A reading is kind of more of a comprehensive look at overall reading skills. And then again, we had 70% of the students had that typical or aggressive growth. So again, not that we were all at benchmark or where we needed to be, but we were moving in the right direction. We could see after year one, we're making some growth, and this is really kind of catching on for students. Next slide, please.
And I think that growth is what really spurred us on to get the staff excited about what possibilities we could have. That first year was hard. It was a lot of change. It was a lot of staff having to come to terms, like Jeannie said, coming to terms with the fact that we weren't, maybe it was Annika, I'm not sure, just coming to terms that weren't doing everything we could do and we weren't doing it right. So our leadership remained fairly consistent. Missy went back to principal school and became our principal and our director of student services. And along with that, the Schools Cubed, one of their directives was to develop a school leadership team. So we put that together. And it consists of staff members from each of we have hallways or pods in our building. And so we have a staff member from each of those pods that is a representative and comes to the meeting with concerns and questions. Our professional development continues to be ongoing with Schools Cubed, and it involves the entire staff. We get that next step report 3 times a year. Patty Montgomery and Donna Heitmanick and Vicki Ferrari Conley are all of our coaches that year. We got to go on a trip to see Angie's school down in Missouri and watch how they had basically turned their school around in 3 years and came back so motivated and impressed and able to understand that, like, these are simple little changes that we can make and we can do this. Some more people got to go to the Plain Talk convention, and then we started reading. Oh, did we start reading, especially once COVID hit and our staff was just inundated with webinars and podcasts and reading a new book and sending links to new people. And I have to credit the whole Science of Reading community for the amount of free professional development that was available and still continues to be available to educators. That just seemed so altruistic, just amazing that they were willing to give of themselves so that we could all get better at what we're doing. It was pretty cool. We also had I believe it was 1 teacher from each grade level participated in Glazer's Top 10 Tools. So we all went through that training. And again, it was just a matter of keep learning. So next slide, please. Our curriculum still remains the same, Reading Street and Haggerty. We noticed a huge difference in our students' phonological awareness skills the following year, with Haggerty being our base for PA. We also were able, thanks to John being able to find us some money in the budget somewhere, we were able to purchase several $1,000s worth of decodable readers for our kindergarten through 3rd grade classrooms. The interventions kind of turned around from being your kids to being our kids, that everyone in our school became an interventionist. I didn't mention this at the beginning, but in the history of our school, there were years where we didn't have small group instruction in our grade, in many, many, many grade levels. Like we just taught whole group the whole time, teach to everybody. So being able to have these, the idea that we all work with kids and find the ways that we can help them the best. So we did a lot of deeper dives with diagnostic testing. We used PAST and PRESS, really great reading phonics screener, and the Haggerty screener was started to be used by a few teachers. And our interventions turned around in year one, but really started turning around in year two. That so many things became based on, so many of our interventions were based on what the skill deficit was. And like Nicole had said, when we started disaggregating the data that we had in our early reading subtests, instead of just looking at the composite score, being able to zero in and look at it and be like, what happened here? This kid, you know, what is the kid missing? What do we need to fill that gap with? So that was a huge change in philosophy and perspective. And it wasn't just Title I doing the interventions anymore. It was, what am I doing outside of the classroom? What are you doing within the classroom? Title I was pushing in and doing some additional things within the classroom that year. So that was pretty amazing. And then our assessments, we had that district assessment team that remained consistent, and we calibrate ourselves to make sure that we are doing the test the same way each time, and each time we screen and across each of the testers that are on the team. Of course, last year we were only able to screen 2 times because of the closure, and all students in our district were monitored either weekly, bi-monthly, or monthly. So next slide.
Okay. Well, like Amy mentioned, we really started to see a change year 2. So there was a change in staff, there was a change with kind of our leadership team, and there was a change in data. So when we came off of year 1, right at the end, we started to really understand how to look at our data better. So we started implementing those data meeting protocols and the action plan. And like she said, we really were breaking down those components of reading. So instead of it being an overall score or just saying, okay, that kid's low in reading, well, what area of reading are they low in? What are we supposed to target? You know, so we started really drilling down and then identifying those kids on a true MTSS, as opposed to just saying, you're low in reading. Now it was, okay, you're low, your universal needs to be amped up, but then in addition, this kid's low for our, you know, targeted, and then this kid needs more intensive. And we would break it down by, okay, you need letter sounds, you need letter names. It wasn't just you can't read. Well, why not? So I really felt like this was the year where it was coming together a little bit for us. When we would have our data meetings, you know, we would give these protocols out to staff ahead of time, kind of say, you know, look at the data, tell us what you think. But again, I'd say most of it fell on our data team to really lead that process. But we started to notice some changes. So the graph underneath kind of breaks that down. So you can see from fall 2018, that was year 1 for us. You can see the subscale. So word segmenting, nonsense words, sight words. And then in comparison, so those kids were all considered high risk based on a FastBridge assessment, okay? So you got 22 kids not knowing their nonsense words at the beginning of 2nd grade, okay? As opposed to now the fall of 2019. Now we go from 6 kids in the year before to 0 for word segmenting, 22 down to 7, 21 down to 2. So for us, we started to say, okay, now universal's working. We're starting to see that breakdown in those subskill areas. And by year 3, we call it the evolution of data. We didn't have to break that down any longer. So we would typically give sort of a kind of more of a 1st grade probe in the beginning of 2nd grade because those kids were behind. And well, we didn't have to do that this year. So it got to the point where now our universal system was pretty sound, and those teachers had really done an amazing job of getting those kids where they needed to. And we were coming off of, you know, a school closure, and we still found that, you know, a lot of those kids sustained. Did we have some backtrack? Absolutely. And we've tried to fill those gaps the best that we could, but we no longer were seeing the drastic difference like we did before we had started. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, grade level data meetings. So we started those action plans, which, like I mentioned, really kind of broke it down into those 3 areas. We really grouped kids based on their needs. And now we started matching interventions. So it wasn't just, and this is from a psych perspective, I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations like this where, you know, you'd have a teacher or a reading interventionist say, well, this kid's struggling in this, and then they put them in an intervention that didn't match the need at all, but you didn't know any better. So you just went with it. And then these kids would go into special education and you'd qualify them. And, you know, the whole time you didn't realize that there was a better way of doing it. So I started to feel like finally we were matching our interventions to the deficit, as opposed to saying, you know, kind of shooting in the dark to say, well, let's just try this intervention because we think it'll work. So that really helped us as a data team and as teachers too, to when they had their small group instruction, to make sure we were targeting that specific need. We would always, you know, collaborate with the teachers to say, what resources do you need? Our, you know, reading interventionists were great about supplying those needs. Teachers had the ability to kind of seek out where they needed additional help. We started using our Wednesday PLC collaboration a little bit differently. Still not great, but better than the year before. We really dove into devoting at least one Wednesday a month where you were getting in and you were looking at your progress monitoring data. So not that they, again, any of us really knew how to respond to that data, but we were at least getting in there and we were looking at it. I'd say year 2 for us is where we also started to see those more valid and kind of sound special education referrals. So there was one kid in particular kind of stands out to me where I knew we did everything possible to make sure before we went to referral that, and I knew without a doubt, we've done everything we can. So I think as a psychologist, it's just encouraging to know that, you know, your universal system is sound. And then when you go through the process, that we've exhausted every possibility before getting to that.
Okay, enter year 3. Our leadership has changed. We have a new superintendent, and regardless of that, the work continues. Our school leadership team is continuing to evolve a little bit. We're making sure that there's more input from the staff on what things they want to see put on the agenda. And that once we're done with our meetings, that those agendas are shared with staff. So it's like everybody has a say in what we're doing and they're well aware of changes that are being made. Our professional development is continuing with Schools Cubed. Our next step reports continue to lead us to the next goal in whatever areas we feel like we can make progress in. I know the last year we were really working hard on that data piece and the school leadership team piece, and we made some good progress in that. Our coaching usually involves Patty Montgomery and Vicky, and then this year I have about half of the year that I've been able to spend a portion of my day doing some coaching with some of our new teaching staff. And that's a challenge when you end up with new staff after in year 3, you know, it's a lot of bringing them up to speed on where we're at. Misty bought the staff, every teacher got a copy of Next Steps in Literacy Instruction, which was suggested after we had taken the Top 10 Tools class. So that has been one of our resources we use. Our curriculum has stayed the same. We are still using Reading Street, and we also are still using Heggerty. And back to Nicole, the chart that Nicole showed with the progress that kids had made, I have to contribute that to us using Heggerty universally. We wouldn't have been there otherwise. The one thing I wanted to mention regarding Reading Street is for the first time in, I think this is year 8 with Reading Street, our staff knows how to utilize the resource that we have and to find the parts in that resource that they need to be able to teach. So we're teaching all of the core science of reading parts and being a very structured literacy school. Jess Morello and I put together, spent a lot of time over the summer getting the sound wall together. And then this year, Rachel and I were able to purchase some additional decodable readers for the 3rd through 6th grade. Our interventions are still about the same. We're refining a few of them. And like Nicole had said, we're really doing a good job of making sure that the interventions we use are targeting the skill deficit areas. Next slide.
Okay. Well, you kind of know our pattern for assessments. We screen the 3 times a year, we do our progress monitoring. We continue to keep that district assessment team as just a consistent administration for those tests. We do the inter-rater reliability, so we make sure we're all on the same page, we're all delivering it with validity and reliability. Our data meetings so far have just been amazing. So our data from fall to winter there was no drop, despite the fact that we weren't even in person the entire screening period from fall to winter. So we had some virtual learning in there as well, but we've really stayed consistent. So we were pleased with that. I really have to give a big shout out to our staff, because our winter data meeting was just phenomenal. Like, we just turned a corner with staff really owning their data. And instead of the data team leading the whole process, I mean, we gave them, the protocol and the action plan and said, okay, look at your data, come prepared. And I mean, we just sat back and this is what I think. I've looked at the data. This is exactly where these kids need to go. This is the intervention I'm going to use. And we're just like, yeah, you did it. So it was really, really amazing to see how far we've come, not only in the data meetings, but just with staff understanding and really owning their data and owning their kids and knowing, hey, I can do this with this kid. No, you don't even worry about taking them. I got this. So that whole approach, instead of kind of pushing them out, they were like, I'm going to keep them because I know what to do with them and I know how to move them forward. Our Wednesday PLCs have really shifted this year as well in a better direction. Most recently, we're just really focusing on our progress monitoring data. And that's, again, something in the past we never really looked at. We would see it, we would say, okay, yep, either they're trending up or they're trending down, but we didn't break it down the way that we do now. So I mean, now we're really drilling and we're looking to see, okay, what's going on from week to week? Is this kid dropping in accuracy? If it is, then why? What small tweak can you put in your instruction? What can you do to help that accuracy improve? Is it a fluency issue? Do we need to put in swooping? Do we need to, practice doing different things instead to get that kid to continue to progress forward? So if we see some stagnant data, if we see that kids are not making progress from week to week, we're having those conversations with teachers. A data rep goes in and meets with grade level teams every Wednesday. We kind of, as a team, divide and conquer that way. And we go in and we have, a set time and we pull up their data and say, okay, what's going on with these kids? And, it's just, we have great conversations around the data and really how they can tweak their instruction to make sure that, all of our kids are progressing forward. So again, when it comes to referrals, those are decreasing. We're not seeing quite as many referrals as we did in the past. I meet with special ed also on those Wednesdays, and we look at those kids. So I mean, it's not just, this isn't a regular ed thing. This is all kids. We make sure that we're making, that our special ed kids are also, making progress forward, and that we're doing everything that we can to just really increase, student achievement and outcomes. Year 3 for us has been a lot. I mean, we joke that it's painful because it kind of puts our team, in the grinder for a little while. Staff, year 1, it was really hard for them. And I think now for our data team and our interventionists, there's just a lot of things that now we have to intensify as well. So as a group, we're all just looking to see how can we, get another round of letter names in on a kid so we can move him out of that, or, how can we capture the most amount of time to make sure that these kids are continuing to progress. So next slide, please.
And just looking at time, if you could, in these next 2 slides, like wrap like in about like a minute.
Okay, sounds good. Yep. So one of the things with Schools Cube that they do with us is they'll, kind of do some data comparisons as well. So this is just kind of a comparison to how we would potentially do on the state assessment. So the first column just looks at our percentile at the 50th percentile on CBM, and then compared to what that would be, what it was on the state assessment and the ELA portion. So you can see that they're pretty similar. So we were probably the only district that was bummed last year that we didn't take the state assessment, because we were sort of hoping to see that comparison. But again, we're hoping and we're optimistic that if that trend continues with CBMs, that we'd see some good ELA scores as well. Go ahead, Amy.
Okay, so John Humphreys put this together for us to help us understand. Basically what you're seeing is, as our work with Schools Cubed and our work towards mastering the next steps report and making those improvements that have been suggested has increased. That's your blue line going up. the number of kids that we have that are at risk has been declining over the years. So I feel that that's very true just from the experience of what we have at our school, and it makes me really happy to know that we're on the right path with what we're doing.
Great, thank you very much. And as a former RTI director and coordinator, I appreciated seeing the data piece of it as well, to show that what you're doing, that data is proving that it is working. So thank you for that piece. And then now we have Kelly. I will let you take it from here.
All right, thank you. I am Kelly Thompson. I am the K-12 director of curriculum, kind of an odd title, Curriculum, Literacy, Instruction, and EL. Kind of became that in 3 years. 3 years ago, I was new to that particular position, and that's when our journey started as well, 2018. And we've come quite a long way since then. It's been quite a whirlwind. Our why, it was the same as, you know, the why other people are making changes. We really looked at the data, and the data was something we couldn't hide from. And we looked at multiple pieces of data, and data doesn't lie. So really moving forward, it wasn't so much grassroots. I knew in the new position that we needed to make changes, but I really surrounded myself with people who were ready to move, to rock and roll, and to shake things up with me. I think if you're going to do this, you have to really have that vision in mind of what you want to do instead of it being bits and pieces. I surrounded myself with 2 other administrators who were actually new to their roles that same year. Julie Weller, assistant director of special ed, and Lisa Braun, who was our newly identified as coordinator of RTI. Both of them had a reading background, special ed background, and coaches were asking us, interventionists were asking us, teachers were asking us for change. They knew that they needed change. So it really came from a group of people who were willing and ready to move forward with it. So I'm actually gonna have you look at a little video I put together. Here's a little caveat that you have to remember. It's a COVID video, so I couldn't go into the schools. So it's videos of videos, but it was really our application, my application for us to become considered a Letters Champion school. But I think the 5 minutes of it, you can kind of take a little bit of a peek into some of our buildings, and you can kind of see the overview of why we ended up here. So Rachel, if you wouldn't mind playing it for me.
Yes, I watched it today, and I think you did a great job in what you were able to do to summarize things. Oops.
Hello, my name is Dr. Kelly Thompson, and thank you for listening to why I believe that the DC Everest Area School District, located in Schofield, Wisconsin, should be considered a champion letters school. We began our journey to embrace and implement the science of reading not very long ago in 2018-19. We knew our teachers, coaches, intervention.
We don't have volume. Maybe it's not going to work. Rachel, are you hearing volume? We had volume. We can't hear you. You muted yourself. You have to keep yourself unmuted.
And thank you for listening to why I believe that the DC Everest Area School District, located in Schofield, Wisconsin, should be considered a champion letters school. We began our journey to embrace and implement the science of reading not very long ago in 2018-19. We knew our teachers, coaches, interventionists, and specialists were working harder each year with ever-increasing responsibilities. But unfortunately, our student literacy data was not reflecting that. In turn, we conducted a deep dive into the curricular resources and interventions and their subsequent data outcomes. And we very quickly realized we were lacking evidence-based practices, resources, and strategies across the district. By winter, we began to work on the creation of a district-wide literacy plan to focus on improving student outcomes by alignment to the SOR. Our first action step was to empower our teachers, and we responded by offering 80 seats in letters units 1 through 4, beginning that summer into the 2019-20 school year for all of our K and grade 1 teachers, specialists, and any additional seats went to interested grades 2 through 5 teachers. During that 2019-20 school year, Letters PD proved to be the catalyst to systematically move our 6 elementary schools towards alignment with the science of reading. As teachers became empowered with their new knowledge and as they saw their students respond positively, we added resources such as Hegarty, Recipe for Reading, and Kilpatrick's Equipped for Reading Success Strategies. By late spring, our team of teachers and administrators identified a phonics curriculum via a teacher vetting process. This resulted in the implementation of foundations that following year. As we increased our learning, our literacy coaches and administrative team jumped in and worked diligently to guide teachers to transferring the knowledge they learned in letters into their classrooms. During this time, our RTI coordinator and interventionists eagerly explored SOR-aligned interventions, such as Road to the Code, Recipe for Reading, and Wilson. In February of 2020, I was personally honored to participate with Wisconsin Call to Action for Reading Excellence in a press conference at our state capitol, where we called on the Wisconsin State Superintendent to take actions that research and examples from other states demonstrated increased reading achievement for all students while at the same time closing gaps. By June of 2020, our first group of 80 teachers completed letters units 1 through 4, and we began onboarding another group of 40 teachers for summer 2020 into the 2021 school year. Our coaches diligently worked this past summer to support teachers with onboarding of foundations and GEOD's implementation. By the fall of 2020, despite COVID, most students at our elementary schools reported back physically for 4 to 5 days a week. Teachers and coaches moved full speed ahead with implementation of SOR-aligned practices, despite the challenges of COVID safety protocols. Our team even got creative, as our coaches videoed themselves during the foundations lessons so students could see their mouths. By December of this school year, we began a vetting process to identify an evidence-based and highly effective new core curricular resource. Presently, we are vetting 2 such final resources that are highly aligned to the science of reading. And while we are only into our 3rd year of SOR implementation and alignment, while we still know we have learning and work to do, we are finding some cause for celebration in our initial onboarding year of utilizing iReady as a fall to winter screener. As you can see, despite COVID, we scored well above the national meeting scores from pre-COVID. And despite COVID, as you can see, we are making some tremendous growth across our elementary students. As we look ahead to the summer, our neighborhood PK providers will partake in Letters Early Childhood, and we will onboard yet another 40 PK to grade 7 district teachers into Letters units 1 through 4. This means by the summer, over 170 of our educators will either have completed or be enrolled in Letters PD. These past 3 years have been tremendously busy. The work has been inspiring, tiring, exhilarating, stressful, and exhausting, sometimes all at the same time. Regardless, this work is worth it, for it is to empower our students with the literacy skills required for life success. I am so very proud of my district and my team for this work, especially my colleagues, Lisa Braun and Julie Weller, our literacy coaches, Molly, Tina, Jackie, Amy, and Trina, and all of our teachers who have willingly embraced new learning and taken the lead to ensure that all students are equipped for reading success. Thank you for your consideration.
So I see we have 1 minute left until 8:30.
It's all right. Keep going.
I'll try to make it as succinct as possible. Obviously, you have the slides here and you can certainly read them. The biggest piece was we had the end in mind, and you think about UDL and you just think about goals. We really kept those goals first and foremost to the front of everything. You have to surround yourself with a team. One person can't do it by themselves. And I really had to make sure that my administrative team was on board. We have a large administrative team here. We're a fairly large district. And I think, a lot of times I would joke that here I come again, here I'm talking about literacy again, watch out, here I'm coming, I'm presenting. I would ask to give updates at board presentations. I would ask to be able to give updates whenever we had a full administrative meeting, with 30 odd administrators at the table. Keeping them in the loop on it, why it was so important, giving them some of the why, some of the background. The principals were more important than ever to make sure that they were on board and they knew what we were talking about. And really drafting that district-wide literacy plan. Yeah, it keeps evolving, but we had 3 years planned out and we've stuck to it despite COVID. The last year, which was our COVID year, if you can go to the next slide, we were really busy. And even though COVID struck, we were still really busy. We were really systematic in our steps of how to get to that end goal of, ensuring that all kids can be taught to learn how to read that first time around. Again, going to the idea that it's got to happen in tier 1. So you can see here, step after step after step, we were working on it and involving everybody. Take a look at the last slide this year. We've still been super busy despite COVID. We actually implemented foundations in geodes this year. The kids love geodes. One of our first grade teachers, they were reading, first grade was reading a book on spiny mice and how spiny mice are being used to actually potentially help paralyzed victims. And so they actually were able to contact the scientist who actually helped provide the information for the Geos book. So we're really talking about that idea of that rich content, that complex text, and making that available for all of our kids. Geodes is made by Wilson, and so you have that really complex text, you have all that rich background knowledge, but then kids go and they practice it on a decodable text. So our kids are really proud of themselves. We're moving ahead. We're doing another 40 letter seats. We're going to have 170 people trained in letters, units 1 through 4. Our pre-K providers, so we have 6 pre-K school sites. They're all going to be trained in early childhood letters, even though they're already doing the early childhood letters this year. They're actually, our foundations this year, they're actually using that curriculum as well. So we have that scope and sequence. Just yesterday, I finished one of the first face-to-face trainings I got to do in our district with 10 of our 7th grade teachers about the background of the science of reading and how that, what that means for them and what they're responsible for. So it's exciting work. It seems like, where did the 3 years go? It started out with, excitement, with waking up in the middle of the night thinking about it, coming home stressed about it, being a salesperson, trying to get people to buy into it, to understand the importance of it. But we've come a long way and our teachers are super proud of their work. So if you quick look at a couple of our last slides here, I'll wrap it up. So this is our first year. We used to use STAR. We wanted a tool that not only normed for us, but also was benchmarked to the standards, to the grade level standards. And this particular graph represents the historical national data, represents about 350,000 kids. This would have been, the left column would have been pre-COVID year. The middle column are all of the school districts minus us who are using iReady right now. And then the last column there where you see K8, grade K, 42%, that's our district. And even though we're in COVID, we're scoring well above in a lot of areas pre-COVID schools that were using iReady. So we're making gains. We know we have work to do. You got to do it step by step, but again, you got to surround yourself with people who buy into the vision, who understand the why behind it, and you can move quite quickly. So I'll just wrap myself up here. I think you can look through the slides and they pretty much speak for themselves. This is our final one. I'm excited to see where we end up this spring. You can see we made some pretty significant growth from fall to winter, despite being in a COVID world. This is our K-5 data.
Thank you, Kelly. And
You're welcome.
Glad to hear, hearing you say that you just did science of reading training with 7th grade staff. And how, it's great to hear that, because we need to remember this is for all of our grades. And sometimes I hear science of reading and it's like to the elementary grades, but it needs to be carried throughout. So it's great to hear that you're already at that point. In terms of Q&A, we are over our time. Mary, do we have questions or anything quickly that we can do?
There's not really any, there aren't any questions in the chat. I think most everything was answered. The presentations were really thorough.
Yes.
I would like, if you could post that in the chat, post the link for anybody who needs a certificate of attendance.
I was going to do that, Mary, and whatever you've shared with me, I don't have access to the chat, I am finding.
You don't have access to the chat. All right, then, let me just kind of go around here.
I don't know if that's something you can just tell people about. It's not showing up for whatever reason.
I need to give you a, hold on a second. Just need to get that, copy it and put it in there, hopefully. Okay, hold on here.
While Mary's doing that, though, I just want to point out to everybody that there are lots of different organizations that are doing journeys into the science of reading roundtables. Curriculum Matters, and these are ones you can easily Google and find. And you can see Dr. Pam Kastner, she did a roundtable with the Bozeman Public Schools. The Reading League National has a roundtable as well. And again, you will be able to find all of our recordings of the roundtables at our YouTube channel. And just recently, we decided to add on a third roundtable. So you will be getting information and you will see on our social media that we will be having a third roundtable on May 6th from other locations throughout the state of Wisconsin. And today's presentations were amazing, and I know we ran short of time. Maybe, Kelly, we might have you come back and maybe even go more in depth with yours. But for me, just seeing all of you working toward improving Wisconsin's literacy rates, all of our panelists and our participants that joined in, we are very grateful and thankful for all of the work you are doing. And Mary?
Yeah, you can probably hear me typing here. For some reason, I could not immediately get on and post in the chat either, but I was able to, so that.
And while Mary's typing that, I'll just finish up by saying too, to thank you to all of the panelists, hearing from Annika from the university level into our districts throughout Wisconsin, and the list of resources you provided everybody, resources from people that can support you in your journeys, books, different instructional resources, professional development resources, and some of them you could hear are being used in multiple school districts. And all being able to rewatch this video to get a list of all of those resources, I think is really important. And again, that data piece, the schools that you see that are working on improving literacy rates and what the data is showing and how what they're doing is working. So it gives me hope as well. And I'm curious, while Mary's typing that in, if Donna's still on the call.
Let me see. She just posted something, but then she might have hopped. I think she hopped off right after.
Okay, that's all right. I was going to have her introduce herself as well as being very active in Wisconsin.
Yeah, it was just really great for me to hear all this tonight, because when I started advocating in my own school district over 20 years ago, none of this was happening. And people would ask me, well, where could I go? What district could I look in Wisconsin as an example of a school district who's doing science of reading? I said, I don't know any. So, you know, the last 5 years, things really started to move forward. And the last couple of years, they've really started to mushroom. So that's, I think, very encouraging.
It
So,
is very encouraging.
yeah.
I visited DC Everest and I spent the day with Kelly last year. And just seeing, Kelly, what you've all done in the, the last year, I can't wait for the ability to be able to get back into the schools and start visiting schools in person. So that's great. Thank you.